Right, so I said, is the worst over? What more could happen, and what actually can we do to try and come out of this tailspin that the rupee in particular seems to be in, if not the stock market? So a range of experts joining us. Let me start by welcoming Ramesh Damani, arguably one of the most influential voices on the Bombay Stock Exchange. 500 points down today at one point before bouncing back. We'll see where the market is headed for. Harsh Mandar, former member of the NSC, is writer, activist. They're calling it the food poisoning of the rupee. Harsh, I'm not sure that that's a fair way to put it, but I'm sure you'll be able to speak at great length on that. Sanjeev Agha is joining us as well, business leader. We have Piyush Goyal with us, Rajya Sabha MP from the BJP, and joining us from the Congress Party is Rajiv Gowda. Thank you all so much for being with us. And a little later in the program, I am going to be talking to Adi Godrej as well, and also to Dr. Ami Bera, who's the only Indian American right now in the US House of Representatives. Ramesh, why don't I just start with you? Because the market, the Sensex and the stock market had a 500-point crash at one point and then bounced back. Now, was that for technical reasons like short covering, or is it because at some point people started to feel, okay, now the worst is over, the crash has been overdone, and it's time to start looking at value? Which of the two do you think it was?
Good evening, Vikram. I think it's more to do with the former reason that there was a technical rally. The market has had almost a straight line fall. So typically when the going gets so easy for either the bulls or the bears, in this case the bears, there's a contra rally that takes place. However, the sector that was so much in focus, the banking sector, remained closed well off the highs and remained very weak. And I think given the way the rupee behaved after the market closed, my sense is the bloodletting will continue tomorrow.
So your sense is that the bloodletting is not by any means over. You would not be advising people to step in and start buying at this time, doing some bottom fishing as it's called. You think it's going to get a lot worse?
Vikram, it's a nuanced position. I think it's probably going to have another tough day tomorrow, because tomorrow the rupee will open significantly weaker, and also is the last day of the settlement in August, which tends to be an extremely volatile day and a very volatile series. But there is some indication that the B group shares of the broader market has shown some signs of bottoming out. What is falling is the A group, the FI-led shares, the HDFC banks, the HDFCs of the world, which are the well-capitalized, mainly owned by foreigners. Those are the ones that are falling, not necessarily the domestic-owned broader market. It's a nuanced approach. I think there is some silver lining in the clouds, and we'll get to that later in the program. But it looks like tomorrow may be a particularly tough day, but there are some silver linings in the cloud also.
Okay, Harsh Mandar, let me get you in, because something else is going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, the land acquisition bill is coming up in Parliament, and that is something which presumably almost seems to be an all-party consensus on. So that's going to go through. There's already been some talk as to the fact that the carnage of the last 2 days was caused by the food security bill. Perhaps misplaced, but your sense of that, do you think that has partly caused what's happening?
I think it's, I think the crisis in the economy is the outcome of something that has been happening for several months, if not years. And it's extraordinary that a bill that hasn't yet been passed is now being seen as the cause of the scapegoat of a much deeper crisis. And I think we need to understand what that crisis is, and there are many experts here on the panel. But I do think that we need to recognize that perhaps the extremely unequal base on which we were trying to peg our growth model has reached its limits and its plateauing off. Even the Asian tigers, even China, went in for started from a much more egalitarian base. So in India, I mean, maybe the problem is, for instance, agriculture, which employs 52% people, has just 5% of public investment and has gone into great crisis. Maybe it is that that people who in the demographic dividend who are going to be our major. I mean, unlike China, which has a much more healthy, nourished, and productive workforce, has not had access to enough nutrition and good quality education and healthcare. So I think that we need to get to the core of the problem and not find easy scapegoats at this point of time.
Okay. Don't find easy scapegoats. Sanjeev Agha, I am going to ask you about that in a couple of minutes, but let me just get some political voices in on that. Piyush Goyal, don't find easy scapegoats, is what Harsh Mander is saying. Now, the BJP did back eventually the food security bill, and in all probability you are going to be backing the land acquisition bill as well. In both cases, these are seen as landmark bills that are correcting historic wrongs. Land acquisition bill will be replacing 100-year-old colonial legislation, and the food security bill is trying to give people, people who've been hungry, food. That's what the sensible purpose behind this is. Do you think those sort of things are what should be blamed, or is the fault elsewhere and the headline writers are scapegoating the food security bill in particular?
Well, I think the problem is less with the food security bill and more with the complete lack of confidence that the world and domestic investors have in this government. Now, really, if you look at the malaise, it draws from a non-functional, non-political Prime Minister who has demonstrated that he has no leadership in this government. We have a parallel power center as the NAC, which does not understand grassroots reality of economics, that unless there is growth and unless the economy generates revenues, they are not going to be able to do half the measures they come up with. Corruption has been the bane of this government, because of which today people don't know a license issued by this government or a law of the land, whether it will stand the test of time, and whether tomorrow they may not once again muzzle something retrospectively. So all in all, between the last 7-8 years of a non-functional government, where we hardly saw any reform, they got some benefit out of the work done by the NDA and a very strong fiscal position left behind. Okay. They were able to tide on a few years based on that. But when the tough times came in 2008, we saw the difference between the boys and the men. And we realized that they could not cope up with it, which the Honorable Finance Minister yesterday acknowledged on the floor of the House.
All right, so let me get...
And then when they started losing the plot, one after the other, the things went wrong. They are now looking at only giving rights and entitlements without realizing that we need to empower people with jobs. We need to create infrastructure and capital expenditure rather than just borrow expensively and use the money and in a very imprudent fashion.
Okay, fair enough. Rajiv Kara, let me come to you. I mean, we did hear Mr. Chidambaram yesterday saying, look, here's a 10-point agenda of what we need to do. Most people would actually agree with a lot of that. Most people would say, look, it's fantastic that at long last the government is getting a committee together which is clearing infrastructure projects that have been held up for a long time. Many people will feel that some of what is being said and done now about we must really get industry moving and uncap animal spirits, this all is correct. A lot of people are going to question why this wasn't done earlier. Why have we allowed a bottleneck to come up to this extent, and then finally at the last minute, after we are in a crisis, we're having to somehow try and do things about it? If we'd taken some of these steps a year ago, we wouldn't have perhaps been in a crisis to start with.
Well, there are a lot of negotiations in a democratic setup, and the UPA certainly pays more attention to issues related to environment, to tribal concerns about their land and their hills and everything of that sort. And in that context, you have to figure out what, how are you going to rework the paradigm in such a manner that people's concerns, the environment are all taken into account. That's what the land acquisition bill is also about, essentially changing the way we address these sorts of issues rather than in the historic top-down, we are taking over here some compensation, that kind of an approach. Anyway, I want to address a few things that Mr. Goyal just mentioned, right? It's just so glib to, reel out all those things saying 8-9 years of no governance. How did we get, an average of 8-9% growth over the last 8-9 years if there was no governance and leadership? We had that, and we had visionary leadership. When the UPA one first took over, you saw this Sensex booming, right back up. If you consider that some kind of a measure. Anyway, the other point is, one of the points about the current account deficit, is the fact that it relates to why we're not exporting iron ore. I come from a state, Karnataka, which was ruled by the BJP for the last few years, and we saw our natural resources being looted in an extraordinary way by the BJP. If they have set a mark for anything, it is in the levels, in the depths of corruption that they are going to, go
Mr.
towards.
Kaura.
So that is the kind of, and after that the Supreme Court had to intervene, and we are paying the price as a nation, unable to export our iron ore which has been mined and ready to go, and all that as a result of the kind of,
Okay. Mr.
BJP
Kaura.
actions that we saw in Karnataka.